Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Toti from the Magic Online clan Seraphim, and I'm bringing you another Commander deck tech. So, this time, as you may have noticed, I have Animar, Soul of Elements. Big shout out to our friend Torrensol, who requested either a Gave or an Animar deck via YouTube, and yeah, now we will be bringing him an Animar deck tech. So, let's start with the most important thing of the general. What does this guy do? He has 3 abilities, as you can see here in the card. The first one is protection from black and white, which is quite useful because black and white are basically the 2 colors that have targeted removal. Red also has damage, but his next abilities make him a bit difficult to deal in that manner. The next ability being, whenever you cast a creature spell, you can put a +1/+1 counter on him. So there will come a point where this guy will not be able to be taken out by direct damage from red. So having protection from white and black, not being able to kill him with damage, makes him kind of a nuisance. Especially since the third ability is that he reduces the cost of all your creatures depending on the amount of +1/+1 counters on him. So this guy can get very ugly very fast if not dealt with. Obviously, he can always be taken out by Wrath of God or Wrath of God-like effect, but we have some ways to do that. So, without further ado, this is our deck. Alright, so let's start from the left. In this column here, I have cards that work well with our commander. We have a +1/+1 counter sub-theme, because basically we want more +1/+1 counters on our guy. We want +1/+1 counters on our creatures, because we have creatures that give abilities with that. So, as you can see, this guy is pretty insane. He basically grows every turn, and then we can move the counters from him to our commander, making all of our guys cheaper. He is pretty insane. This guy is an all-star as well. The Plexcaster Frogling. That's a mouthful. He has Graft 3, so for those of you who don't know, Graft basically means that whenever a creature comes into play, you can move a +1/+1 counter from a creature with Graft to the creature that just came into play. So it comes in as 3/3 and it allows you to move counters around. And they all normally have some sort of ability. This one in particular has the ability to give Shroud to other creatures with +1/+1 counters on it. Well, to creatures, even himself. So that's pretty sick. He protects your general very well. In a similar fashion, we have the Sporback Troll here that also has Graft. He's a bit worse than the other one. He's a 4 mana, a 2/2 Grafter. But he's able to regenerate and can regenerate other creatures with a +1/+1 counter. So that's pretty sweet. Next up is Evolution Bat. This guy is kind of like a Dragon Blood in the way that if you pay 3 and tap it, you can add a +1/+1 counter on target creature. You also tap it, so you could theoretically use it defensively as well. The thing is that the other ability, so this part right here, is pretty sick. If you have 4 extra mana lying around there, you can pay 4 and double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. So that is pretty ridiculous. We want a lot of counters on our general and on our creatures overall. So yeah, that's pretty sick. So basically with this we can double the amount of counters on our grass, on our Forgotten Ancient, Graft creatures, etc. Similar is this guy. He has to be tapped first, but as you might have seen, this kind of combos with that. This guy actually just straight up doubles the amount of counters on something, so kind of similar, but pretty sweet. One important thing about Evolution Vat that I did not mention is that it adds counters to creatures that didn't have counters before. So it combos, it allows us to use these abilities on creatures that wouldn't normally have counters on it. Say, I don't know, like a primeval title or something like that. So that's pretty sweet. Also, it combos with some of the persist cards you'll see later. Right then Power Conduit. This thing just kind of moves around counters. So again, similar, allows you to put counters on creatures that don't have it. Then you can either add it with increase the counters with this, or proliferate or something like that to add counters. This thing as well is decent whenever a creature dies, and believe me, a lot of creatures die in Commander. You can put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature, which would normally be your commander. And it's quite cheap, 1/1 to equip, so it's definitely worth it. Then we have a couple of creatures that just use +1/+1 counters, so they want to have them on them, and they do cool things. Kind of combo nicely with a Forgotten Ancient. Spike Feeder allows us to gain life, and Spike Weaver allows us to basically fog, which is pretty sweet. Also, we have with this an infinite combo, so to speak, with Genesis, which allows us to basically fog all the time, because once this guy dies, we can bring it back with the Genesis, etc., etc. This guy also uses counters, allowing us to draw cards by removing them, and Triskelion just pings stuff, which is sweet as well. And this is one of the sweet ways to add counters. Viger, in case you guys don't know it, you can read it here. What he does is basically whenever a creature you control other than him is blocked, the damage it will be done to it is prevented, and you can instead put an amount of +1/+1 counters on that creature equal to the damage dealt to it. So, say you block my 3/3 with a 3/3. Now my 3/3 doesn't die while yours does, and mine is now a 6/6. So that's pretty sick. It makes math pretty impossible. Then we have a couple of proliferate options. Thrumming Bird, just to put more +1/+1 counters on the cards that already have them, and Contagion Engine, which doubles as removal and basically proliferating a lot. On this column over here, we have just a couple of equipments that help us protect our commander. He already has protection from 2 colors, so he doesn't need that much help in that area. But it's still good to have some added protection to him, because if he lives, let's just say, it's pretty good for us. Also, a possibility would be a Dark Steel Plate here, just because it helps protect us from a Wrath God type effect. So that would be pretty cool. Maybe we can remove something like a Cloak and add a Dark Steel Plate. That's something to definitely keep in mind. This column we just have some ramp cards. Classic Sakura Tribe Elder, Farhaven Elf and Wood Elf do basically the same thing. They just search for lands and put them into play. Sol Ring, don't really need to explain to anyone. Solemn Simulacrum, this guy is pretty sweet as well. He gives us cards, he gives us lands. Primeval Titan, kind of on the expensive side, but if we can reduce his cost with our commander, then he is pretty sweet. Also, he allows us to get some of our cool ability lands, such as the Maze of Earth, the Avimaya Hollows, and stuff like that, which we'll come to later. And this guy is just sweet in any deck playing these colors. Well, it's especially sweet in this deck because he's a creature, and we obviously need to play creatures in order to trigger our Animar. As you can see, this deck actually plays 40 creatures, which is quite a bit for Commander. Right, so Quality Oracle, he can either put a card in your hand or ramp you a land, so either option is really good. On this category here, we just have some nice card advantage spells, because we are playing blue, so why not take advantage of the card advantage? Fact of Fiction is a classic, Thirst for Knowledge is good, Heuristic Study should be in any deck playing blue, and I do mean any deck playing blue, the amount of cards this card draws you is ridiculous. I mean, you would think it's not that great, and it shouldn't be if people actually paid for the cost, but you would be surprised of how many people do not pay 1 extra mana. I know I get frustrated a lot of times when opponents have this, and trust me, if you play blue, play this card, you will thank me. Again, with our proliferate theme, we have Tezzeret's Gambit, which also draws us 2 cards, and that's a counter to our commander, so that's pretty sweet. Muldrifter, another card drawing dude, which can become pretty cheap with a reduced cost from the commander, and can also trigger him, so that's good. Greater Good is another, I would say, staple card in green. You basically sacrifice to draw cards equal to a creature's power, and then discard 3. Not super exciting with our normal creatures, but as soon as you have something like a Titan or one of our fatties we'll see later, it can get pretty sweet. Then this guy, Nin the Pain Artist. This guy, I have no idea what he's like. He can draw some cards, he can kill some creatures if we really need to. But yeah, I'm just gonna try him out, because why not? Oh yeah, well, one thing I didn't, you might not know this card, that's because he comes in one of the new commander decks. Each commander deck, this is something I probably should have mentioned when I was talking about the commander. I will actually minimize all this so you don't get distracted. There you go, now you can see. This guy is not an actual commander in one of the commander decks. He is just a creature that is there. Each of the commander decks that Wizards released has its commander, obviously, which is always a wedge-colored general. So basically an enemy tricolor general. And then there is also a second legendary creature in the same 3 colors. So in theory you could switch them around as commanders if you want to, even though most decks are built for one of those, so it's not a good idea. Anyway, I'm rambling. What I'm saying is, this guy is not an actual commander from the deck Wizards released. The actual commander in that deck is whatever his name is of the 2 reflections, the one that copies stuff. This guy is like the support commander, let's say. And I was saying there were 3 new legendary creatures in each of the decks. You have your general, you have your support wedge color creature, and then you have a double color legendary creature, which is in this case Nin the Pain Artist. And we'll try him out, or her actually. If you remember my previous deck tech, we could actually see all 3 cards there as well. Kalia was the commander of the deck. Then I was playing Angel, I think he is. He's Tariel, the Reckoner of Souls or something like that, the one who revives creatures from your opponent's graveyard at random. And then there was a red-white angel called Basandra Battle Seraph, if I'm not mistaken. That basically is the one that dominates combat. So, yeah. And here we are playing these 2. We're not playing Reiku of the 2 Reflections, or whatever his name is, just because he doesn't do so much for us here. Even though he's strong enough that he might be just playable. Anyway, back to the card advantage spells. We have Oracle of Moldaya, always nice, and helps us ramp as well. And then Lurking Predators, it's pretty sweet. This triggers like 2 or 3 times. On average, I would say like 2 or 3 times per turn, and with us having 40 creatures, it can get a couple of. It can get good value. Let's put it like that. Also, we have a couple of fatties because our deck ramps and accelerates into fatties a lot, so you can really mize a fatty out of this. So then we have just a couple of tutors, just a worldly tutor that lets us search for a creature. Fierce Empath lets us search for a creature with converted mana cost 6 or more, so kind of like a treasure mage. Tooth and Nail, you probably all know. This is another staple on Commander. So let's just look up 2 fat creatures and put them into play. And then Fauna Shaman is pretty sweet, considering we have a trillion creatures and a lot of utility creatures to look up. Over here then we have our counter spells. We're playing blue, so we would like to have a couple of counter spells. Hinder and Spell Crumple are kind of the same thing. They are basically used for countering commanders and have them never come back again. Well, kind of never. They just put the commanders in the bottom of the library, which is pretty sweet. Mana Drain is just here because it's ridiculous. And yeah, that's just about it. Then Draining Welk is pretty cool. It comes into play with the counters. It can get all the benefit of the counters, and it can have a reduced cost thanks to the commander. So it is pretty good. And then this little girl is as well pretty sick. She can be quite annoying. She counters, you probably know her, she counters non-creature spells and has persist. So on herself, or rather by herself, she already counters 2 things. And you might remember we have a lot of ways to move counters around. Well, with persist, she comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it, and if we add a +1/+1 counter on top of her, once she has that, both kind of cancel each other off, and she remains without any counters on her, as if she just came into play, which allows her to persist back once she dies, giving us kind of infinite counters. So she's pretty sick. Then I want to start with this row over here. Actually, these are our fatties. These are, we have a deck that ramps a lot and reduces the cost of our creatures a lot, so we would like to take advantage of that. We do that by, we have this guy that is the original Wedge commander, Intet the Dreamer. He is one of the legendary dragons from Future Sight that allows us to play cards from an opponent's library once you hit with him. Then Simic Sky Swallower, he is just big and untargetable. Inkwell Leviathan is kind of the same thing. These 2 are just kind of big, dumb creatures. They don't really do much and could be easily replaced by other things that hit as hard as well, or at least one of them, right? That hit hard and do actually something. Like Terastodon here, for example. This is pretty sweet. He can get rid of up to 3 permanents, non-creature permanents. And there's a lot of annoying permanents in EDH. There's a lot of enchantments, a lot of artifacts, and he can get us out of some serious pickles. Then Woodfall Primus is kind of similar. He as well destroys non-creature permanents with persist, and we already spoke about how cool persist is with +1/+1 counters. This guy is kind of a staple in any green commander deck that gets to 8 mana, let's say, so he's pretty sweet. And then we have a big fat Eldrazi, which is as well some card drawing. I normally don't like Eldrazi's, but this one is okay. He only has Annihilator 4. It's possible to deal with him. I don't like the stupid Eldrazi's, the one like, what's his name, the indestructible one, Ulamog, the infinite guy here. That guy, the come into play effect is pretty sweet, but 11/11 indestructible and Annihilator 6 is pretty stupid. Also, Emrakul falls into that category, but luckily he's banned now from Commander. Then over here we just have value spells, just spells that are cool and basically have to be in any deck of these colors. You have Emea Elder, you always want to play in green. Eternal Witness the same. Regrowth, I would say probably the same. Genesis 2, he just gets a lot of value by returning creatures to your hand every turn. Acidic Slime, as I said, there's a lot of artifacts and a lot of enchantments. And even a lot of annoying lands like Volrath Stronghold, for example, or Academy Ruins or stuff like that. So this guy is really... You are never unhappy to have this in your hand, believe me. This guy is kind of similar. He can destroy artifacts or enchantments, so that's cool. And even though he doesn't combo so great with +1/+1 counters, he does profit from proliferate, so he is kind of reusable. Then Trigon Predator, as I was saying, you have to kill to be able to kill enchantments and artifacts in your deck, otherwise you can lose. Brutalizer Exarch, this is another of the cards that, I don't know, it's I mean, it should be pretty good, I guess, especially with a deck that reduces mana cost. So this guy lets us tutor a dude or remove, as we were saying, an annoying permanent. So kind of like Acidic Slime. So yeah, I definitely think this guy should be good. Mercfiend Leech, this guy I'm not too sure about. All our deck is pretty much blue and green, and we have a lot of decent, or rather, we have a lot of creatures. So he should be pretty good. Let us pump our guys. I mean, the double color ones, he gives double power toughness, but we don't have so many. This guy is one of the prime candidates to be taken out in the next build of the deck. I just basically gonna try him, see how decent he is. He has kind of a fairer version of the Seedborn Muse ability. Maybe this is better than Seedborn Muse, I don't know. We don't have really many ways of using his ability anyway. And then Bloodbraid Elf. This is just a 2-for-1. She is pretty sweet. Again, she is great. You want her in your deck, most probably. Crystal Shard. This is, I would say, this is a staple in any blue deck that plays creatures as well. This card is so sick. It protects your own creatures. It bounces creatures, or even if it doesn't bounce opponents' creatures, it makes them hold on to the creatures. They can't curve out so great because they have to hold at least 1 more mana before they can play their creatures. And if they do that and you really want to bounce it, you can always use this ability end of turn and then during your turn again. So it's pretty sweet. I really recommend this. Willbender is just a card I like. It's so annoying to have stuff redirected, and there are some quite annoying cards to have played against you, like the Day of the Dragons and I don't know, discard your hand and stuff like that. So this could be pretty decent. Also for Phyrexian Metamorph, he copies one of our fatties or just about anything. He's just efficient, so he's there. As far as the lands go, there's nothing special to be said here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. I basically just added all of the dual lands and search lands I have in these colors. Then cool cards like Tenno's Ice Bridge, Exotic card, because it just adds mana of pretty much any color. Command Tower you have to play. The hideaway lands that are possible to activate. Some pump. Yeah, not too much. The cooler cards with actual abilities are, well, this one would go here as well, I guess, are these. We have our Mace of Ith, which isn't really a land. It just doesn't really give us any mana. It just has this ability, which is pretty sick. Gets creatures off our back. Oran Reef the Vastwood. Again, he puts counters on all our dudes, which is pretty sweet, as we said. Land of a Reborn, kind of a one-time Oran Reef, just like land with graft. And then Yevamaya Hollow allows us to regenerate our dudes. So that's about it. That here is our deck, and we will play a couple of games with it, then see what we think about it, and yeah, then see how we can improve it. So I'll see you in the first game then.